This is why you should be careful who you tell the time, because sometimes that simple answer could open the door to a nightmare you'll never escape. Thelma was a young woman trying her best to survive. She was already a single mother of one little boy, and now she was carrying another baby in her womb. To feed herself and her children, she sold foodstuff at the local market in Asaba. Every day she stood by her store, calling customers to buy her tomatoes, onions, and peppers. That hot afternoon, something unusual happened. An old woman walked slowly to Thelma's store. She was not a regular customer. She looked at Thelma with strange eyes and asked her a question that didn't make sense. The old woman said, "My daughter, what is your time?" Thelma thought the woman simply wanted to know the time of the day. She checked her wristwatch and answered, "It's 2 o'clock, Mama." The woman smiled, nodded her head, and walked away without saying another word. At that moment, Thelma felt a sharp pain inside her stomach. It was sudden and unusual. She touched her belly but told herself it was probably just the baby moving. She continued with her market business, not knowing that by answering that simple question, she had stepped into something she could not escape. After a long day in the market, Thelma finally packed up her foodstuff and headed home. She was tired, but at least she had sold enough to buy food for her little boy. When she reached home, she cooked, fed her son, and took her evening bath. By 10 p.m., she lay on her small bed, holding her stomach gently and whispering a prayer for her unborn baby. Soon, she drifted into sleep. The night was quiet. Everything seemed normal, until the clock struck 2 a.m. Suddenly, Thelma heard her name. It was not the voice of a person she knew. It was heavy, deep, and frightening. The voice dragged her name slowly. "Thelma, Thelma." She opened her eyes quickly and looked around. Her son was still asleep beside her. The room was dark, but the sound came again, clearer than before. "Thelma." Fear gripped her. Her heart started beating fast. She sat up on the bed, wondering if someone had entered her house. She called out softly, "Who is there?" But there was no answer, only silence. For a few minutes, she stayed awake, holding her son tightly. Then the pain in her stomach returned, sharper than before. She groaned, pressed her belly, and began to sweat. At that moment, Thelma realized something was terribly wrong. The simple question she had answered at the market was no longer simple. It had followed her home. Thelma didn't sleep again that night. She sat awake until morning, her heart still racing from the strange voice she had heard. By the time the sun rose, her eyes were heavy, but she forced herself up. She had to return to the market. Survival didn't wait for fear. That day at her stall, everything felt different. Her body was weak, and her stomach kept tightening as if something was twisting from inside. She tried to ignore it, but customers noticed. One woman buying tomatoes even asked her, "Thelma, are you sure you're okay? You look troubled." Before Thelma could answer, her eyes caught a figure in the distance. It was the same old woman from the day before, the one who had asked her about the time. She wasn't close this time. She stood across the market, staring directly at Thelma. She didn't blink. She didn't move. Just stood there, watching. Fear rushed through Thelma's body. She tried to call someone's attention, but when she looked again, the woman had disappeared, as if she was never there. That night, Thelma tried to pray before sleeping. She begged God to protect her and her children. But just as she was about to close her eyes, she heard footsteps outside her window. Slow, dragging footsteps. Then, a knock on her door. 3 heavy knocks. Thelma froze. She heard a strange voice whisper, "Thelma, open the door." Thelma sat frozen on her bed, staring at the door. The knock came again, 3 loud, slow bangs that shook her tiny room. Her lips trembled as she whispered a prayer, "God, please. God, please." She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. She reached for her lantern and lit it, hoping the light would chase away her fear. But the moment the flame rose, the knocking stopped. Silence filled the room again. Thelma waited. Minutes passed. Then suddenly, she heard it, the sound of her own door creaking open. But she hadn't touched it. She grabbed her son and pulled him close. The room grew colder, and the lantern light flickered as if someone had blown on it. From the doorway, a shadow moved slowly inside. It was tall, bent, and thin, almost like the shape of a person, but not fully human. Then the voice came again, stronger this time. "You gave me your time. And now, your time belongs to us." Thelma's heart pounded. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. She just clutched her son tighter as the shadow crept closer, stretching across the floor toward her bed. And right before it touched her, the lantern went out. Thelma didn't know if she fainted or fell into sleep, but when she opened her eyes, she was no longer in her room. She found herself standing in the middle of a wide, empty field. The night sky above her was dark, but a red moon glowed, casting a strange light on the ground. Around her, 12 women stood in a perfect circle. Their faces were covered with black cloth, but their voices whispered her name over and over again, Thelma. Thelma. In the center of the circle, Thelma saw the same old woman from the market. But this time, she looked younger, stronger, and her eyes glowed red. She pointed at Thelma and said in a deep, commanding voice, "When you gave me your time, you gave us your blood. You and the child inside you now belong to us." Thelma's knees grew weak. She wanted to run, but her feet felt heavy, as if they were chained to the ground. The circle of women began chanting louder, clapping their hands, stomping their feet. The ground shook beneath her. Suddenly, a strong wind blew, and the women's cloth coverings fell off. Thelma screamed, because every single one of them had her face. 12 versions of herself, staring back at her. She fell to the ground, clutching her belly as the chanting grew louder. The last thing she heard before waking up was the old woman's voice whispering, "At 2 o'clock, we will return." Thelma woke up in her bed, drenched in sweat, holding her son tightly. But deep down, she knew this wasn't just a dream. It was a warning. By morning, Thelma was weak and shaking. She could no longer pretend it was just stress or pregnancy pains. What she had seen in that dream was too real. She tied her wrapper, carried her little boy on her back, and went to see her neighbor, Mama Nkechi, an older woman known for her strong prayers. When Thelma told her everything, Mama Nkechi's face hardened. She sighed deeply and said, "My daughter, this is not ordinary. You should not have answered that woman in the market. That was no ordinary question. But don't be afraid, we will pray." That evening, Mama Nkechi gathered 2 women from the church and they prayed in Thelma's room. They sang hymns, they clapped their hands, and they called on God's name. For a moment, Thelma felt peace return to her heart. She had almost lost hope, but one thing remained in her heart, her faith in God. The next day, she went straight to her pastor. With tears running down her face, she explained everything about her encounter with the old woman, the question of time, the strange dreams, the shadow, and the words on her wall. The pastor listened quietly, then said firmly, "Thelma, the devil came to steal your destiny. But remember this, no witch, no darkness, no power is greater than the power of God. You will not lose your child, and you will not lose your life. In the name of Jesus Christ, you have no power here. Leave her and her children now." From that night forward, Thelma never heard the voice again. No more knocks at her door. No more shadows at 2 a.m. The pain in her stomach stopped, and for the first time in weeks, she slept peacefully. She continued going to church, praying every day with her son by her side. Months passed, and the pregnancy grew strong and healthy. When it was time, Thelma gave birth safely to a beautiful baby girl. She named her Chisholm, which means God is with me. Her testimony shook the entire community. She told her story in church, warning others, "Be careful what you say, even to strangers. But most of all, never forget, God is the greatest. He alone can save." Thelma's life changed completely. She no longer lived in fear. Whenever she remembered that old woman, she no longer trembled, because she knew the power that had delivered her was greater than any darkness. And so, the simple question about the time that once opened the door to her nightmare became the reason she found her true strength in God. This story is a reminder, never take life for granted. Evil is real, but God's power is greater. Stay watchful, stay prayerful, and may your time never fall into the wrong hands. Please give this video a like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories. See you in the next one.